The candidates have previewed our questions for tonight, and the order in which the candidates are asked questions has been determined by random draw. We begin with Rick Mark, and we'll continue from left to right as seated. Does that make sense?
No.
Caroline.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll be last.
so I'm going to read the first question, and that's going to go to you. And so I said.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm on track then. And then we'll go to Carolyn and that is true. And then each question will pick up a different candidate. So, question 1. A comedian on Netflix told his Denver audience that they were one bad mayor away from being Portland. We all know what he meant. He means homeless, tent camps, abandoned campers, violence, open drug use, kids whose bus shelters contain needles and crack pipes. All this is here and getting worse. What policies would you advocate to affect change? Let's start with Mark. Rick.
For starters, I'm at the risk of exposing my ignorance or naivete. I'm not sure I accept the premise. I don't know that Lincoln City is turning into Portland, certainly not in my experience. I've been going around campaigning and knocking on doors for the past couple of weeks. I've knocked on over 500 doors, and I haven't heard, and I've spoken to quite a few people, and I haven't heard that sort of concern expressed anywhere. That said, we did have City Council had a very moving or scary presentation from Judge Bockhart, senior judge in Lincoln County, expressing her anguish over how serious the growth of the drug abuse problem is in Lincoln County, especially since Measure 110 was passed, which basically decriminalized or greatly reduced the penalties for drug use. And she said, and certainly abuse of fentanyl and drug overdoses are a huge problem in this county, whether I personally see it or not. So what policies can the city engage in? One thing that the City Council is very actively working toward is adding a detective to the police force to focus on narcotics. Also, we're looking at adding more code enforcement officials, which could be effective in addressing camping and homelessness. You should know that Lincoln City has an ordinance that blocks camping on public property, so that's already banned. I've been asked to stop. There are some other things as well.
Thank you. Carolyn Wynn.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I echo some of what Mr. Rick Mark just said. However, I think that Portland is probably an example of abject failure in leadership. The mayor, Ted Wheeler, in Portland allowed during 2020 the riots that were taking place. He allowed a lot of that to happen. Our police were not supported. Mr. Mark and myself are both in the Lincoln City Police Academy right now. It's a 12-week academy. We're about halfway through. So partnering with our local police department and making sure that they're supported and that they have the opportunity to enforce ordinances and laws that are currently on the books, but also we need a district attorney that supports our police department. And we also need, I'm glad Representative Gomberg is here tonight. I've actually lobbied to him before, and Senator Anderson. We need them when they go to Salem to make sure that they are voting for the bills that are proper in enforcement and taking care of people and not rewarding criminals for their activities. What happened in Portland in 2020 made the national news, so it's a disappointment. We're only 90 miles west of Portland right now. I see a lot of overflow of the homelessness, yes, but the criminal activity, the drug abuse, the violence against people and against property crimes. As city council members, we can do a lot to lobby our representatives who live here in town, Dick Anderson and Representative Gomberg, live right here, so I'm sure that they don't want that kind of stuff happening. And lobbying them and building up good networks and making sure that we let them know the kinds of bills and things that we care about down in Salem are important to us. As city councilors, we can do a lot to support our police and make sure that the correct bills are being passed to protect the people of Lincoln City. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Kastner.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it is in the mind of many Oregonians, whether or not it's presently in your doorstep or in your window. Housing has been a huge priority for me as a citizen. It's my #1 priority for Lincoln City, specifically affordable housing. I've advocated that on city council. It's documented many times over that that's a talking point for me, is that we need to make that a priority in our city and advocate for that. And just like Carolyn was saying, advocating for our representatives and reflecting those values. So when you have more housing that's affordable, you're less at risk for people getting priced out of their homes, which is the homelessness aspect. When it comes to drug use, I have a couple different thoughts on that. Echoing Rick Mark about the narcotics detective, and as well as the community services officer. Those are the two key players in managing the violence and the activities that people have fear around in those situations. And then finally, when it comes to drug use, treatment facility, rehabilitation programs are essential. Oregon has one of the highest numbers of drug use and addictions and one of the lowest numbers of rehabilitation centers. So I advocated during one of our recent council meetings to have a meeting discussing the Samaritan Treatment and Recovery Program, Recovery Services Program, so that we can look at helping them get started, helping that funding, and doing what we can as a community to help people get better, get in better places, feel better. This issue is huge. It's multifaceted. I have like 30 seconds. That you could talk about it for 10 minutes, and there's so many things that we can do, and I would recommend just coming at it from every direction until we see improvement.
Thank you. Melissa Sumner.
Yeah, so the question, if I read it correctly, is what policies would I advocate to affect change? And it talked about homelessness, abandoned campers, violences, open drug use. To me, they're all kind of knit together, so to speak. I know the city has transitional housing that we've got low-income apartments coming, but that's just the tip of the iceberg of what we need. We did, which I'm really proud of with planning, is got the approval for tiny homes. That's gonna make a difference for our unhoused. I think those are all great, but things we really need to focus on is, well, SB 110, decriminalizing of drugs, when you can get a bigger fine for having an illegal firework than having drugs. An ounce of heroin on you is just ludicrous to me. So I think we need to come up and advocate at a state level that we come up with more strict and consistent ways of handling these violations. We need to have more treatments in place. Exactly what Sydney said, there has to be an enforcement past just a possible fine. There has to be some steps and policies and procedures in place that we take for when all these drug use happens, which brings the violence to our door.
Thank you. Riley Hoagland.
Thanks. So I think the comedian you're talking about is Tim Dillon, and he was just recently quoted as saying, if you think the population is going to get healthier, smarter, and more adept at problem solving, you're on crack. So I just want to put perspective of his other side of, do you believe in society getting better? He's vehemently opposed to it. So, as you've heard, absolutely there are programs in place. Luckily I've been on council for a number of years to be advocating for Helping Hands, which is transitional housing from homelessness to your first steps, working with them, advocating for funds to be put on. As you heard Ms. Kasner talk about the STARS program and how that is. We have one of the worst drug addictions and the least access to that. I was also part of the Lincoln City Police Academy, so only to get tased, but that's okay. But it's important to educate ourselves on how those things are going. Recently I was in Bend with the League of Oregon Cities, and seeing what that transitional housing looked like and what are the models that are effective already and what was that per unit cost and how were those in place for veterans, for people who do have a limited aspect for that. So I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. Redefining what public safety is and advocating for people advocating for our police department to be more wider and deeper in those kinds of ways. There's funding now that was just announced for CAHOOTS, which is a program which is an acronym that's in the Valley, and that's how do you facilitate public safety for those that are having those mental health crises, and a lot of it I think is mental health that shows up as drug use and abuse and not having the skills necessary to navigate life.
Thank you. Casey Miller.
Yeah, and the county commissioner domain, that level of government service, the good news is that we do provide services that ease the suffering of many individuals in this circumstance. So we don't have a direct housing model or a direct homeless model, but our health services, our mental health services are certainly helpful and to mindfully manage governments and make those as robust as possible is definitely part of the solution. In my case, making sure our policy supports those programs. Nevertheless, there is a nationwide shortage on mental health care practitioners. The way in this country we look at mental health care versus physical care, there's an insurance problem. People can't get the same insurance for mental health care, and that's certainly part of the equation too. At the county level, we can improve and barriers to housing through our planning systems, for example. But I suspect that the multifaceted problem is something that we just need to slice off and dice off and do the best we can. It is a symptom, I think, of a larger problem, and how we contend with that, I think there are many answers to that. Are we willing to make it our problem, or is it somebody else's problem? So I do think we need to ask ourselves those questions. County government can play a role, but we do need an interjurisdictional effort to continue to alleviate the suffering that people are experiencing.
Thank you. Susan Walke.
A lot of what I will say has already been said, but I will say it again. That was a quote from a comedian, but it's not a funny situation. We have too many homeless in our county and too many children without a consistent place to sleep at night or enough food to eat when they're not at school. I work with a nonprofit that feeds these hungry children. The city has budgeted for and is in the process of hiring a community services officer to help relieve patrol officers of some of their paperwork to allow them to be on the streets more. The community services officer can also assist the code enforcement officer with their responsibilities. These individuals can help our patrol officers and sergeants do their jobs more effectively. We are also trying to find funding to hire a narcotics detective so that the county interagency narcotics team can be reinstated. Judge Bockhart has pleaded with the cities of Lincoln County to provide funding to reinstate this team to control the drugs in our county and stop the fentanyl deaths. The city has provided resources to organizations to get people off the streets and into housing. Transitional housing will be available when Helping Hands opens its doors, hopefully the end of this calendar year. Getting abandoned vehicles removed from streets is a lengthy process, but the city is working with the county to find a location to store these abandoned vehicles. The city has worked with a local nonprofit to convert a hotel into temporary housing. These rooms are sponsored by local nonprofits to house individuals and families to move from homelessness to appropriate housing.
Thank you. Question 2, and we will begin with Casey Miller. According to a homepage Facebook poll, when asked, what topics would you like candidates to address? 44% said housing, 13% said kids' activities, 9% said taxes, 8% said traffic, and 7% said business health. Please choose one and give your opinion as to what role the government should have in these.
Bethany, choose one for me.
Huh? Oh, gosh. Kids activities.
Kids activities. Well, right now we are looking to use some ARPA funds for childcare, and do you think when we think about childcare, we are hoping that childcare has some kids activities? Looking at how we can continue to use ARPA funds to maximize and bolster more childcare services across a variety of domains, I think is a good thing. I'm excited to see what will come of that. We're developing that grant right now, but that won't last forever. I mean, that is going to be limited funding. But where we can remove barriers, for example, in planning that allows facilities to ramp up easily, and how we can work with the Oregon Coast Community College, for example, to put together programs and possibly fund those programs to get more childcare activities is something that I think we need to pursue, and then we need to ask our community as well that this is a priority in the locally desired services they want from county government.
Thank you. Susan?
Thank you. I chose housing mainly. Housing is moving forward slowly. We have a complex of over 100 units that will be completed in the north end of Lincoln City, hopefully by the end of next year. We have another complex of around 40 units, also close to being able to start work. All of these units will be for low and moderate income families and individuals. Thanks to Lincoln County, there are 2 Habitat for Humanity homes being constructed in my neighborhood. There are at least 2 other lots in the same neighborhood that were given to local organizations to provide housing to low-income families. These organizations are making plans to build homes on those lots. Next Monday, I will be attending a regional housing workshop organized by the League of Oregon Cities. I'm excited to learn about new ideas at that time. At the City Council meeting last Monday, we approved a text amendment to allow a group of tiny homes which will be used for fire survivors. Yes, over 2 years after the Echo Mountain fire, we still have people who do not have permanent homes. Many of our counselors attended the League of Oregon Cities conference in Bend last week and will be reporting on the things they learned during a workshop next week. I'm looking forward to hearing the ideas they brought from that conference. I was going to say a couple things about kids' activities, but I won't. Yep, that's me.
Thank you. Rick Mark?
Just let me add a little more on housing, because Susan actually said quite a lot of where my mind was going. It might be, and first of all, I want to say, well, I don't think Lincoln City's turning into Portland. The problem, the affordable housing and homelessness in this region is very obvious. There is progress with the developments that Susan and Riley also mentioned. But the city it's really limited in what it can realistically do. The city does own some land, and it's able to leverage that ownership into making it available to developers who promise to devote some of that land to what's known as affordable housing, restricted income, limited rental housing. But as far as actually providing the housing, we really rely on developers to do that. The 107 unit that's going up across from Kenny's IGA was done with, was it federal or state? I think it was federal grant money that the developer qualified for, because Lincoln City provided the land and also something like $800,000 worth of funding for the utility hookups, that sort of thing. So that's the sort of thing the city can do. In the future, we have another urban renewal district that is accumulating funds for the north end of town, the villages area, and that sort of development is also in the future, down the line, we're talking about some years, and hopefully that will help happen as well. But it's a long, slow process, and there's really only so much the city can effectively do.
Thank you. Carolyn Wynn.
So I am going to probably tie in a couple things here. Housing, the voters pamphlet came out today, so that was good timing. And I'm actually running on the fact that we have a housing shortage. Everyone knows that. Everyone's commenting on that. The thing that bothers me the most is when cities use our tax dollars to acquire property. And I think the property that's coming up right now tonight is the Villages, which is the north end of town. It's over 300 acres of undeveloped. It came from 3 pools of money. It came from the general fund, and then the housing, low-income housing fund, something like the subsidized housing fund, and then also open fund. So 3 different areas of funding to purchase this area of land 13 years ago. And I can tell you, I'm not on city council, so I'm not privy to executive sessions and work sessions. I don't necessarily know everything that's being discussed, but I do know as a taxpayer and as a citizen in this town, 13 years is a long time to hold on to property. So an article that came out 4 months ago, it says that the county home prices are among the fastest growing in the state. 8 communities in Lincoln County are among the 50 places in Oregon with the fastest growing home prices. I can only imagine that this ties into our first question, which is people are getting out of these larger urban areas. They are coming to the coast. They want to live here because we have a great place to live, and then they want to come here and they want to buy a home. They don't necessarily want to rent. And so the 300 acres that should be developed shouldn't be taking this long. The 1-year increase in Lincoln City was from 123,000 to 512,000. It's a 31% increase. People want to buy a home. They want to actually have equity. They want to have something they can pass down to their children. So one other quick thing, I think I have just a moment here, is we are at a 41-year high in inflation right now. So I just want to touch on taxes because it is important to the people in town that voted on this, is that the TRT taxes right now, the last 2 years have been, I don't know what that red card means, but it sounds like stop. Just stop?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, yeah, so I'm a politician.
In conclusion.
Yeah, in conclusion, I would just
Gotta
say
say
that.
that.
Yeah, the last, thank you.
Cindy Kastner.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about housing again. Hopefully you guys aren't getting tired of it. It is our biggest problem. We have, the most community feedback. As you said, I think 44% of people wanted to hear about it. So let's talk about it. There's so many different things we can do, and I have the opinion that we should just do everything at every level, every person. We should all be making an effort, just like we did, I think, as a community with the wildfires, that Echo Mountain wildfires. We all came together and worked on it together. I'd like to see that for housing as well. There's a lot of different things we can do. Rick Mark and Susan Waukee talked about some of the things council's already done. Carolyn talked about some ideas with land use. I'm also in favor of looking at lowering caps for VRDs. So not kicking anybody out of their VRD that they already have, but just lowering the threshold so that in the future we have more homes available, less homes being used as vacation rentals in our city. I'm also in favor of looking at opportunities for small houses. They're smaller, so they're cheaper, they're easier for people to get to when they don't have the ability to get a $500,000 house here. Just recently at our last council session, I spoke up and advocated on behalf of changing the verbiage a little bit so that we can open up a tiny home village in Lincoln City. I'm also inspired by things other cities in Oregon are doing. We can do more if we come together and work together on this. I love the idea of like LeGrand's Veteran Village. I would love to see something like that, utilizing the Oregon Permanent Supportive Housing Program. There's so many different ideas out there, and I welcome all of the feedback, any ideas, every approach, all hands on deck for trying to make this better and make it more affordable here in Lincoln City.
Thank you. Melissa Sumner.
All right, I'm the odd man out because I'm gonna talk about business health, because I think local government has a huge responsibility in business health. I think it's our job to promote and support and advocate for our businesses, our local businesses that take care of our community, and that trickles down to taking care of our kids and all of these things that we need to make our community keep going. I think it's important that taking care of business includes the TRT tax that I really hope gets passed, because that money is going to be used to take care of our infrastructures, to take care of things that we keep putting Band-Aids on until they break. We're gonna be able to use that, and then it's gonna create more jobs that give more security to these families who were one of the highest food insecurity counties. I couldn't believe that when I learned that at a recent conference. Those things, if our businesses didn't have to spend as much on silly things like permits that are the most incredibly confusing things to navigate in Lincoln City. I've sat with people who've come into the office and want to start a business that's a really great business, like for example, a roller skating rink in Lincoln City. How great would that be for the local families? But they can't, because they can't get past the permitting, or they can't get the building owner to agree to let them lease that space for it. And we don't have any hand or say into, because we can't as a city tell them you really need to lease to them. But there's got to be some way for us as local government to come in and help nurture those businesses, help nurture the health of our community by supporting them. So for me, I think business health ties into everything. When we can pay our people more, they can afford different places to live. We can pay our people more, they can afford more kids' activities. Business health, I think, is the most important, because we know housing is being worked on everywhere.
Thank you. Right at home.
So as a former child of homelessness and who was asked not to return to our rented motel room, housing as a student is very important. I know the struggles of what it was like, and halfway through my senior year to be told not to come home. And what was I gonna do? And luckily the community, I took a bus and then another bus and got to a friend's house, and they said, you can stay here with us. So, and then I stayed with teachers, and then another friend, and then I graduated with a 3.5 GPA in Cupertino, California. So housing, from the perspective of the student, is super important, because do you have that support? How do you have that support, and what that's gonna be? We hear it all the time that our community is missing people in the missing middle, let's say, the working professionals, the teachers, the educators, and those individuals that we're short-staffed. And they're not gonna sell their home from wherever they're at and buy here, and rent here, which is what we've spent millions of dollars. The city of Lincoln City has spent millions of dollars creating rentals. And in that, generational poverty, if you're looking at building 30 to 60% median income, those people are really relegated to where they can work and how they can work, because if they make more than a certain amount, they're out. Their culture, their community, their friends, their family, gone. And so now you have, how do you manage that aspect? I think a total shift could happen here in this community. You've seen us spend millions of dollars on rentals. Can we spend it on housing? Can we properly vet those people? Can we show the community? Because our record is where we spend the money. Our budget is our history, and you'll see where we spend that money. And can we do that for people who are here, my grandmother, and have that be what we facilitate? Because ultimately, people that live here want to believe that we care about them, and how can we do that?
Thank you. Question 3, and we'll start with Melissa Sumner. John F. Kennedy once said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." What would you ask the people to do for Lincoln City and Lincoln County?
To start with, I'd say give. We need to give our time, we need to give our compassion, we need to give our voice and our expertise and experience. And then when we do that with the people who are on city council, who are on local governments, who are on state governments, then we're making an effective change. So what they can do for me is there, but I think the better question is what I can do in my mind, and that's I can be consistent, I can listen to them, I can take concerns and then follow through with them. So what they can do is come find us, come tell us what you need, because I can't help you if you don't help me help you. So in my mind, I guess, what they can do for me is educate me on what they need. Okay, like I said, give us all your time. That's pretty simple to me.
Thank you. Riley?
So I believe there's an opportunity to separate us into three types of people here, and in regards to participation. You have people who participate and want to participate more, people who participate and participate to their content, and people who participate and maybe want to do less. We're all here together completely. We all have different abilities, we all have different interests, and when you're here doing, that is enough. And it's not for me to say do more, other than if you would like to. We're all approachable people. There are lots of different ways to facilitate more participation. There's opportunities to recognize what you already do, because we're all here. We love this place so much so that we've committed ourselves to live here. And recognizing that aspect of what we're doing here, having the opportunities to directly communicate with people regardless of party or partisan or anything like that. Ultimately, we're here, we're gonna see each other at the grocery store, we're gonna see whatever, how that is. And with that love and understanding of empathy and communication, I think is really what's gonna shift and saying, I love Lincoln City. I love Lincoln City. I moved here 14 years ago and everybody was like, I hate Lincoln City. What are you talking about? Do you see outside? Do you see the trees? I came from the Midwest, right? It's very fundamentally different. And I am so blessed and lucky to be here and work my butt off so that I can stay here and facilitate that for myself and my children and the community and all of that. So if you're doing, congratulations. If you want to do less, because that happiness will absolutely come out in everything that you do. And if you want to do more, talk to any of us and we'll help facilitate that.
Thank you. Casey Miller.
Yeah, of course, us here, we are volunteers, we're pretty pumped. But taking some discretionary time that you might have, and not everybody has that, but if you do, take a slice of it and think about how you can be an advocate in your community. I would also say maybe we should consider backing away from the shame-based culture that we're in. Of course, not everyone, but there is a tone, right? There is a divisive tone, and it's very tribal. And my thought is that we identify needed areas of improvement, but also recognize sometimes when we're telling people that they're bad, the whole person is wrong because of the choices they're making. And that just immobilizes people further. So let's be more mindful of where other people are at and the struggles that they have. And maybe that'll free us a little to take a little time to find ways to help. And then with that in mind, break it down into little pieces. I mean, absolutely contact me, contact any of these people and ask, well, what are the things that I can do? I am committed to trying to find more ways, simple algorithms, so the community can find touch points in county government that make their action steps easier to do, like the Cliff Notes participation. But maybe shut off Netflix, shut off Prime, because there's more media out there than we've ever seen in the world to be distracted with. And while we do need to take time for ourselves, we need to take time for others too, and I think it can be done. And it's going to need to be a collaborative effort on behalf of all of us, and I think we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Walke.
Thank you. I think that Rick and I are the only ones who remember when John Kennedy said that.
That's right. Some of you are.
Yeah, right, but only the ones that were there. What I would like the people of Lincoln County or Lincoln City to do is to become more involved. We have openings on many committees as of the end of December, and we want to interview people in November and December in order for there not to be a gap in the membership of the committee. We have one vacancy on a new committee that is called the Nelscott Urban Renewal Agency Ad Hoc Committee. And it will That committee will be exploring the possibility of a new urban renewal area in the Nelscott area. We have 2 vacancies on the Planning Commission, 2 vacancies on the Arts Committee, and 2, or maybe 3 vacancies on the Arts Committee, and 2 vacancies on the Budget Committee as of the end of the year. There's no vacancies on the Library Board right now, but if you're interested, please apply and we can interview when a position becomes a vacant. We also have 2 vacancies at the end of the year on the Parks and Rec Board, and 1 vacancy at this time on the Sustainability Committee. Applications are always accepted for any committee, and you can email the city recorder or visit the city's website. You can also get involved in our schools or any of the nonprofits in town. Please come see me, call me, or email me if you have questions or concerns. I keep office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays at City Hall, or I can meet you somewhere else. Please don't complain about things on social media. Report crime to your police department, get to know your neighbors, attend public events, and get to know other members of the community. That's what I ask of the city of Lincoln City.
Thank you. Rick Mark.
Don just held up the green card and he meant to hold up the red card.
What's that?
Not done.
Is this time up?
I
Sorry, Mark, sorry.
So, my lovely wife Britt and I moved here to Lincoln City 10 years ago. I think we agree we've never lived anywhere else where we felt so drawn into the community as here. And we've both been active volunteers. We were weekly volunteers at the aquarium up until COVID. Haven't gone back there. During COVID, I volunteered to park cars at the very successful, I want to say, vaccine clinic run by the county down at the county fairgrounds. And if you just, well, I think the vaccination rate in Lincoln County is among the highest in the country, and the COVID rate is among the lowest. So I think that was quite a success. One of the things I remarked on about Lincoln City, and I think it's true of Newport as well, is these towns they're big enough that if you want to just mind your own business and keep to yourself and go about your daily life, you can do that and not be bothered by anybody else. But they're also small enough that if you want to have a voice in your community, there is plenty of opportunity, and we see this time and again. There are vacancies. We often get applicants for these various boards and committees, and council members interview them, and we get little resumes. And one thing I notice is they're almost always, one of the questions is, how long have you lived in Lincoln City? And it's almost always 18 to 36 months in there. It's sort of like this gestation period where people come to town and they kind of see what it's about, and they see the opportunity, and they step up. It's a great thing about this community, and I mean, I see it just with the people here and how well we all kind of get to know each other. So the opportunities are there. It's just a matter of doing as much or as little as you feel like.
Thank you. Carolyn Wynn.
You know, this is a great question, and when I saw it come up as one of our questions that we were going to be talking about tonight, John F. Kennedy, a Democratic president, that quote actually hangs on my wall in my stepfather's shadow box. So he was in the military for over 25 years in the Navy, and I was never in the military, but I was raised by a military father. And so patriotism and service and giving back, this was just ingrained in me. I think that the community needs to understand that we need volunteers. Coastal Support Services right now has cut their hours back to 4 days a week instead of 5 because we don't have enough volunteers. And so back in January, a gentleman died here in our town, Walter Hergert. He was an unsheltered man. He was actually bused over from Newport to Lincoln City to go to the warming shelter. He got here, I ran into him in El Torito 2 nights before he died. I didn't even know that was going to happen. I was down there buying a meal, and I asked him if I could buy him something. He obviously looked hungry. He didn't have any money. His shopping cart was outside. And I just reached out a hand to help this man, and 2 days later I found out that he died of exposure in our town. That is a tragedy. That's sad. I went to his funeral. I learned a lot more about him because of the family and the friends that he had from Newport, growing up over there and then living over there unsheltered and homeless. And I just think that, thank you for the yellow card, I just think that we need to find a lot of ways to volunteer and certainly to help those who have less than we do. And Coastal Support Services is definitely one of the nonprofits that I support here in town, as well as the food pantry and making sure that people have clothing and that they have something to eat and stay warm. Nobody else should die in this town. It's a tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Castman.
Thank you. So I'm a volunteer at my heart. I think many of us here are, and many of you attending probably are as well if you're coming to these sorts of events. When we're talking about what you can do for your community, I just think of whatever your passion is, whatever that could be, trying to find a way that you can use that passion to benefit the city as well. So Susan talked about several committee positions that are open. If you're interested in, maybe you're concerned about the budgeting of the city, look into applying for the budget committee. You know, if you're concerned about planning in Lincoln City, housing type things, that's a great place. Put in an application there. My husband loves turtles, favorite animal. One day he came home and he tells me he went to a meeting about invasive turtles in the area. And I'm like, how did you even hear about this? But he just found that's an area of passion of his, went to a meeting to try to work and make it better. So my point is just that everybody has those things. My areas, our housing is my number one. And then I'm also really passionate about professional development, so I volunteer with my state society. I'm on the Coastal Support Services Board. So, you know, find your niche, whatever your preferred thing is. If you love writing, write an opinion piece, give public comments, give feedback to your counselors and your mayor. Tell us what you want us to do better. Give us direction and ideas. We are a reflection of the constituents in those offices, so utilize that, you know, work that to your benefit and make sure your voice is heard. So many of you have given ideas that I've heard and just been like, that's a great idea, write that down, you know, we need to bring that up. And we can't think of everything by ourselves in council. We're one voice of 7. We're not an individual. We can't go in and just change everything. We have to, as a council, come to a consensus on what would be best for our decision making. So just use us and let us be your voice, and if not, volunteer.
Thank you. So that was our last question. Did I miss anybody? No. That was our last question. So each candidate now has 1 minute for a closing statement. We'll begin with Susan Walke.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I believe that I'm the best choice to be elected mayor this November. My experience as a North Lincoln County resident of over 30 years, a former city employee, and community volunteer give me a unique, important perspective. I have worked to support the welfare and betterment of Lincoln City in a variety of positions during the time I've been here. I have experience with what has worked for Lincoln City and how the city government functions. I believe in continuing education and learning about new methods and viewpoints. I've served as budget chair, urban renewal chair, and council president, as well as mayor for the last year and a half. I'm currently retired from the workforce and have the time needed to prepare for meetings. As mayor, I listen. In a leadership role, often listening is more important than talking. I have the skills and experience necessary to continue as Lincoln City's mayor.
Thank you. Mark.
Let me see if I can hit a couple points that I jotted down and didn't get to. For one thing, I've really enjoyed my time on City Council. It has been quite the learning curve. And it's a complex, you'd be surprised, the city of 10,000 people, just how complicated it is. And we all have our hats off to the excellent staff which we rely on to let us know what's happening in the city. I'm hoping to build on that experience and that knowledge and continue in this seat. A couple other things I do that I haven't mentioned is I am currently the chairman of the Urban Renewal Agency, which is a complicated process. I'm also on a statewide council, had to be nominated and approved by the governor. It's a statewide council of 22 people who are focusing on improving emergency communications. And I know it's a big issue in this community to do a better job the next time there's a disaster or evacuation. So we are working toward that. My time's run out, but I just kind of wanted to get that in, let people know that there is some progress in that area.
Thank you. Carolyn Wynn.
So I joined a group called Braver Angels, and it teaches us how for the reds and the blues to be able to talk to each other. These are nonpartisan positions, but right now in this community, and actually as we move towards November 8th in the election, the hot buttons right now as I move around and I talk to people in the community, even though the position of city councilor or mayor are nonpartisan positions, it is a partisan aspect of service because the people care who we are, aligned with. So I would say that the primary difference between myself and Ms. Kasner is that she is endorsed by the Democratic Party because she embraces, or they say, she's embracing liberal, progressive ideals. I am a Republican. I embrace conservative, constitutional common sense. I'm sure she has common sense as well, but that would just be the primary differences between us. And I would say that judge accordingly, vote your conscience, vote for the person that has the values that align closest with you in this election.
Thank you. Well, fortunately, Sydney is next.
That changes my existence. So I will say, that does matter, but I am a daughter of a career Army veteran. My brother is in the Army. My mother was in the Army. I have a family ideal that I was raised in entirely with conservative values, and I respect them. And I'm able to compromise. I can sit in the room, just go to a family reunion, watch me do it. I can sit in the room. I can get uncles to talk to each other that don't talk to each other because we can work together. These are nonpartisan issues. We can find solutions. I'll take your ideas. I don't care who you vote for. So I had all this other stuff I was going to say, but I'm your best candidate for Ward 2 because I'm able to compromise. I'm a great listener. I'm a good communicator. I'm one voice of 7. You have to be able to do that if you want to get people to hear what you're saying and reflect your values in city government. So, thank you.
Melissa Summer.
I'm not running for that seat. I will say this. I think I'm the best candidate for this for lots of reasons. Literally from the moment I moved here, I've stepped up for Lincoln City. I actually met Bethany within 30 days of moving here, right after Echo Mountain Fire happened, and I was there at the Lincoln County Survivors Room helping get it set up so that the people who lost everything could come in and get food and clothes and things they needed just to get by from the day. I then instantly found the opening for Explore Lincoln City Committee. I was actually interviewed by Rick Mark, who wholeheartedly endorsed me because he knew I had a plan and a vision and a goal that I care about this community. I was unanimously appointed to Planning Commission, where I'm really proud of the steps and the goals and that we're taking to make this comprehensive plan what it should be, to get it up to code, to get it to where it's livable and look at Lincoln City's core vision and values. So that to me is why I think I would make the right choice for you for Ward 3, because I'm not going to stop giving to Lincoln City.
Thank you. Riley Hoagland.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you all watching. I appreciate the time you've taken to sit here and listen to us talk about ourselves, which is extremely uncomfortable. It does not feel good to try to say the things that you are to do so people believe. I've spent 11 years of my life working for free. Every day, all the time, advocating for people culture, community, businesses, fire survivors, going down to, really, 30 seconds? Anyway, so I'm not going to tell you that I'm the best. I'm going to tell you that this is what I've done over a decade of my life. I'm going to still do the things because it matters to have a diverse, inclusive person in this role to bring perspective that is important for people in this. That is different than what has traditionally been done. It's all recorded. Take your time, do the research, and have a fun time.
Thank you. Casey Miller.
I think you can vote with me with confidence, 14 years and working inside the Board of Commissioners office surrounded by elected officials and attorneys. I can tell you I know what I'm getting myself into. And I want to do it. I really believe the county has further modernization needed. We need a county-wide plan. We need a vision so that our entire organization might move forward in unison, and I'm looking forward to implementing that and of course listening and hearing from the community, because ultimately it is the community. I am a conduit for you to realize the policy you would like to see and the community you'd like to behold. So thanks for your votes. And I'm looking forward to having a good time this next 4 years. Thank you.
So check this out, 801. So, you guys are great. This was great. This was a great program tonight. I enjoyed it a lot, learned a lot, and I don't know. I think when we talked about this was Don's idea, by the way. When we talked about it, I was like, I don't know. And it was a really great idea because the quality of the candidates have just, made tonight great. So we thank you for that. We didn't know. So that concludes our forum. And in closing, I'd like to say this. See that? Don was mayor years ago, and I used to complain a lot. And I thought he could get everything changed overnight. And what Don kept on saying, he said, if you're passionate about that, why don't you go ahead and step up? And I was hearing that a lot from you guys tonight, and that's kind of what I wanted to say in my closing comment. And that is, tonight I feel like we have really witnessed democracy at its best. These candidates are stepping up and running for office. They have expressed their views in an effort to improve their community. And that's kind of the bottom line in what I think we've experienced tonight in listening here. So on behalf of Lincoln City Homepage, I want to thank you all.